Do you bear your testimony? Have you borne your testimony on Fast Testimony meeting?
Yeah.
And what are the, do you say, I know this church is true?
No. Not at this point. I could say I know I love this church and I know it's good, but I don't use the phrase I know this church is true. I'm very inclined to focus on I believe in God. I believe God's real. I believe God's loved me. Those three things. In my heart, I say I know that, but I'm happy to change that word "know" to "believe," because "know" is a loaded word. So I believe that. Last time I bore my testimony, it was that I didn't know the church was true, but that I knew it was capable of a lot of good. And I think a church is like people. It can be good or bad or both. And
You didn't have people coming up to you expressing concern that you didn't know?
no, I had two people come up to me and said, thank you. I feel valid. I didn't think you could hold that view and be a valid member. And so I think sometimes it's easier for me to say certain things since I was out for a while. Whereas if you've been in the whole time and you're trying to uphold this image that you know it's true because you've been saying it since you were 3, it might be harder to say things you really feel without fearing that people will be worried about you or something. Whereas for me, it's like, oh, he came back. We're just glad he's here. So the expectations are a little lower, maybe. But I don't know how often I'll bear my testimony. I'm a person that likes to talk in church and participate in the lessons and read the lessons every week. And the conference in Elders Quorum, we do conference talks, and I try to read them and listen to them. And the apps we have now are pretty cool for studying the gospel.
That's for sure. Are there callings you would not accept that you're aware of, like ward mission leader or, something like that?
No, I don't seek any calling. I definitely, for example, if...
Do you have a calling now?
Yeah.
Remind me.
I'm the quorum service coordinator, and I'm the ward technology coordinator. And so the technology thing, it's like help people plug their phone into the TV or whatever. And there's not much to do there. But the service coordinator has been really fun. That's right up my alley. But if I were called to something else, I would be happy to try to do it as best I can, and I would do it in my way. If I'm a ward missionary or something, I'm probably going to be pretty good at getting out and meeting people and building friendships within the neighborhood. And maybe some of those people would want to start coming to church and go, and maybe a lot of them, most of them wouldn't. But instead of being that missionary that shows up to their house every 2 years and says, hi, we're from the church. Now I'm stereotyping again, aren't I? And just kind of, if they're interested, you want to pursue it. And if they're not, you just disappear for another 2 years. I would love to break that pattern and be the guy that that wants to have a relationship with people. If they don't want to join the church, who cares? If they want to, let's be part of the neighborhood. Let's do things together. Let's find a basis. Let's find excuses for interacting, not so that I can get you to join the church, but just so we can be friends. And that would be fun to me.
Some people get annoyed by certain hymns these days, like Praise to the Man or Follow the Prophet. Are there certain hymns you wouldn't sing because they rubbed you the wrong way, or are you kind of back singing all the hymns?
It's like there are hymns where the words, like there's a pattern in some of the hymns, like the first 3 verses are all warm and fuzzy, and then the 4th verse is closing the deal with some, now that you feel good, here's the big commitment that you're going to agree with. Or so there are some hymns where the words resonate more or less with me. But I think of it kind of like music. It's like, go back to your teenage music, and there are some songs that are expressing values that you don't have, but you love the song because you were 15 and loved it.
Like dirty deeds done dirt cheap.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying? We've got an AC/DC fan here on Mormon Stories podcast, everybody.
Yes. And sometimes the music isn't about the words. It's about just singing together with people. And that's uplifting in its own way, whether the words are exactly what you want or not.
Somebody asked, if you were to go to the temple, would you believe that you're actually doing ordinances for dead people that would allow them to get to heaven?
I wouldn't care. I would believe that by going, I want to do my own names. Family history is another thing I would love to get more involved with. And I'm not concerned about because they've already had this thing where, because of technology evolving over time, there are names that have been done 50 times or whatever. And so I'm less concerned about how that works, and more concerned about me saying, here's this blue card with, John Tippetts. Who is this person? He matters. He's related to me. I think connecting with your past is powerful on a lot of levels, and I think that's why so many people like to do it. And to be able to go to a temple and carry that name and kind of have that person in your heart with as little or as much information you know about them, and to be hoping good things for them. I really believe there's something after this life. I wouldn't be concerned about trying to describe it very particularly, but maybe it's much more of just a hope. But if there's something, I think there's something ennobling about just caring about somebody who came before. And that would be kind of the sense I would be doing it in.
And then what do you do with the literal Mormon belief that you have to have these Mormon ordinances to make it to the highest degree of whatever and all that ordinance stuff?
I see the ordinances as a way to show my commitment to God, to this organization, this church, and to the community, because a lot of times you do ordinances together with people. It's something you can go to the temple on your own and do it, but a lot of times it's ward temple night, or you're going with your wife or some family members, or what. It's a social type of activity, and I really don't feel a lot of concern about whether it's the one way to get to God. I think it's a beautiful way to think about rising. And when women think about the past of the temple, and if it was distasteful to them because of the way the doctrines have changed, I can understand that too. And I would not want to oppose something that I think I can be uplifted by onto other people if it's distasteful to them.
And this is just me trying to hit something really head on. We're kind of talking around maybe a more central idea, which is that the church has its doctrine and its theology. And I think we could try and get postmodern about the fact that words can mean different things and people all bring their own perspectives. But I think reasonable people could agree that there's a certain set of tenets that constitute kind of core Mormon doctrine. Mm-hmm. And, I just gave you one that, like, the church teaches that it is the one true church, that it has exclusive priesthood authority, that its baptisms count in the eyes of God in a way that no one else's baptisms do.
Yeah.
And that you need its, authority-based baptism to get into heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when I ask you, what do you think about that? What you do is you respond saying how you view baptism is.
Yeah.
But you don't actually address the church's sort of official theological position per se.
I don't feel like I'm required to hold it in exactly the same way Bruce R. McConkie might have held it. Because we don't sell Bruce R. McConkie, we don't sell Mormon Doctrine and Deseret Book anymore. We don't sell Doctrines of Salvation and Deseret Book anymore, I don't think.
But that's skirting it a little bit, because I think...
Oh, ask it more directly then. I want to answer.
I think if every let's just say that the and I think this is even church doctrine, that the people who determine doctrine are the First Presidency of the Quorum of the 12. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we could, they might see the Adam God theory differently, or they may even see polygamy differently. But I think every single one of them would say that you can't get to heaven without a baptism by proper authority.
Okay.
And meaning either under Jesus's time, or under like Alma the Younger's time, or under this modern church's time, and any other baptisms won't get you in heaven. I think, so this isn't just like, oh, that's Bruce R. McConkie's opinion. I think every prophet and apostle from now back to 1830 would all agree on that point. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that would be the case.
Yeah.
So what do you do? I know that you've got your own sort of like interpretation of the symbols and the ordinances and the teachings, but so many times you're sort of just choosing to ignore or say it's not important to you what is really core, official, accepted Mormon doctrine or theology. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, like, how you do that.
It doesn't bother me. I don't feel the need to. I feel like I can't. A common theme, like when you're in seminary, if you listen to Michael McLean or some of that Mormon pop type music in the 80s and 90s, remember that song from Celebrating the Light, Hold On, the Light Will Come?
Yeah.
And it was like this pleading of the kid who doesn't have that testimony that other people around them are saying that they have, and that scriptures and the teachers and the church is promising that they can have and that they should have. And so there's this sense of urgency, like, what's wrong with me? I need to find out for myself that the church is true or whatever. And so it becomes this big thing that people feel really worried about. And before I left the church, I was very much in that mode of starting right with God. Just, I need to know you're real. And it's really urgent, because if you're not real and this isn't real, then I can't keep doing this. And when I came back, the sense that I felt, just that central testimony that I believe in God, that just transcends everything by far in my mind. And I don't feel this sense that, oh, how many months are going to go by before I know the Book of Mormon is true again, in the sense that that most people would be saying it. I don't feel that urgency. And if that means that I'm looked over for being able to get the priesthood again, or if that means that I would never have an important calling again because I can't be trusted with the orthodoxy, I don't care one bit about that. For me, the heart of what I feel and the heart of the gospel of Jesus Christ is God is love. And so a lot of people want me to feel very anxious that I don't match up with the mold. And I don't feel one bit, well, maybe one bit, but not much at all. By far, I'm a lot more concerned about how I interact with fellow members than whether I have a cool calling or I'm Mr. President or, whatever. I could be the ward toilet cleaner for the rest of my life, and I could be very happy in this church. And if the fact that I don't have what others might see as a gift, the scriptures talk about different gifts, and some have the gift of knowledge and testimony and prophecy and whatever. Those aren't my gifts. My gift is I can connect with people. I love people. I care about people. And that's my gift. And I'm not going to worry if I come to know. I'm studying the scriptures this year. I'll read the whole Book of Mormon. I'll study it. I'll read some of the commentary on it. But in my heart, I don't feel driven to beg God to tell me to know it's true, because I know He's true. And I don't... What does that mean if I say I know it's true? I make fellow members feel like I'm maybe on the inside of this circle of people who are mature in the gospel. I don't care how I appear in that sense of wanting others to think I'm spiritually mature. I think for me, I want others to feel loved when they're around me, and that's way more important than whether they think I'm on my way up the ladder or something. I just don't care one bit about that.
Yeah. I think I think there's a lot of beauty to this. I talked to Carolyn Pearson today, and she basically says God is love, and that's all she cares about is just kindness and love, and that's the gospel to her, and I resonate with that. Kindness, I think, is really one of the only things that really matters. I mean, we are taught that truth matters, and I think other than the fact that we were all, and I was talking to my friend Tyler Alden about this the other day. It's sort of like we were all set up with this false binary. The church is either true or false, and like I used to say when I did the Stay LDS website, like, is a ham sandwich true or false? It's like, what is true and false? Like, you can't, organizations or like ideas, and that's sort of getting really postmodern. But what I'm kind of getting at is I can see that point of view, but we've all been kind of set up with this idea that it is true or false. And we come by it honestly because that's kind of what they teach us.
Yeah.
And then so many of us decided, well, if it's true or false, it's false, so I'm out of here, right?
Yeah.
But in that process, we've all made so much noise that the church is changing and changing and changing, and they're shortening the time, and they're being better to women, and they're, being better to LGBT people in some ways, and they're being more transparent about their history and all these things, and they're moving sort of in the same direction that Protestant Christianity is, which is just like, come if you want to. We're one of many good options, and there's good everywhere, and you can have a metaphorical belief if it's not literal. That's the direction the church seems to be going in. What I think, is I'm trying to really nail it down. Of course, you should follow God if He tells you to, and of course, it's beautiful that you are just focusing on kindness and love, and all the other theological and doctrinal stuff. It's just not important to you.
Well, when I say it's not important, I'm not saying the doctrine and theology isn't important. I'm saying I don't feel it's important. I don't feel like I have to know it's true, because that, for me, took me away from God when I tried to kind of force that, and it made me hate God. And now that I believe in God again, and I've felt that essence of what for me God is, I can be uplifted, and I can value a lot of teachings, even if I don't see them as something I know is true. I mean, what does that do? If I talk with somebody who's not a member of the church, what am I leading with? I know my church is true. therefore yours is false. You should be like me. Like, that seems weird.
Okay, but here's what, and I'm not arguing with you. I think what you're doing is beautiful, and I wouldn't have brought you.
But I see what you're describing, because I know that impulse to feel like you can be able to say, X, Y, and Z are true.
It goes deeper. I'll just, and this isn't me arguing. This is just exploring. Yeah. We're being philosophical for a second, because I think what you do is beautiful, and I respect you, and I hope that there are tens of thousands of you throughout the church. But if you think about the church, so there are a lot of churches before our church was started, right?
Yeah.
So we could have just all been one of those. Mm-hmm. Or Joseph Smith could have just been one of those. But instead, Joseph Smith says he prayed to God to say which one of those is true. And he says that God told him none of those are true.
Yeah.
This is the one true church, and that we should be in this one. Mm-hmm. And then Joseph Smith produces scripture, which he claims is from God. And then he creates all this doctrine and theology. And that all that's the whole purpose. Like, the whole purpose is we have a prophet that talks to God. We are the one true church. This scripture is from God, and we are the church. And so that's why this whole thing was created. That's why. That was the whole purpose. It's kind of like the Pinewood Derby is to race Pinewood cars. The KKK is to discriminate against people of color. And the Mormon Church was to believe and to follow a church that is supposed to be God's one true church with true scripture, blah, blah, blah. Uh-huh. And I think some are just trying to wrap their brains around the fact that you're not really engaging the church in the spirit of why it was created in the first place. Joseph didn't just go, hey, we need to be kind to people.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start a church so that we're all kind to each other. And let's just be kind. And God said be kind.
Yeah.
And let's be kind. No. Like, it was not that. It was all these other legalistic, doctrinal, theological, rules-based kind of things. That was the deal. And it's just like if you go to Pinewood Derby, you race Pinewood Derby cars. And if you go to the KKK, you burn crosses, and 100 years ago, you lynch people. So what you're kind of doing is you're saying, I'm going to go to the Pinewood Derby every week, but I'm never going to race a car. And I don't even pay attention to the cars being raced. I just want to eat the cookies and talk to the people afterwards and be kind. Or, okay, the KKK is lynching people and racist. I'm going to be a member of the KKK. And I know that's an extreme example, and I'm not trying to say the church is that bad. But you're basically, it's a mind bender for some people, because you really are engaging the church not in the spirit of either why it was created at its core, or how it's being run or sold or taught by its top leadership now. It's just about the church is about so much more than just kindness and love. It's about all these legalistic doctrinal theological things. And so you really are, it seems like you really are doing that, and you have that right to do it. You say God told you to, and I have no reason not to believe you. But I think that's, for some people, it's a pretzel, it's a twister. It's just like, you're not really doing Mormonism. You're doing kindness in Mormonism, but you're not really doing, some would say, and I'm not trying to insult you.
Yeah, I'm smiling because you're right. But it's not a twist. I don't feel like a pretzel being twisted. Maybe as you were talking.
No, you're just ignoring the Pinewood Derby, and you're just talking to the people and drinking the punch, eating the cookies.
The Kool-Aid.
And maybe you're watching it, but you're not actually doing the main thing that people go there to do, which is be a member of the one true church and believe what the church teaches and follow it like it's, I hope that makes sense.
Well, the Pinewood Derby needs many people. They need dads who know how to make Pinewood cars for their kids to win. No, I'm joking there, kind of.
No, again, it is your right to do this, and I respect it.
Yeah,
so I'm not even challenging you.
To get the ribbons, I would say I would challenge the notion, because I keep hearing it over and over. There's this mindset, there's a mold of, if you're going to be a good Mormon, this is what it looks like. And if you aren't going to look like that, you're not a good Mormon. I would challenge that. I would challenge that the essence, all these, what you're referring to as legalistic or, the practices, the ordinances, you need to do it this through this church or it's not valid. So if you were baptized in another church, you need to be baptized in our church because ours is the valid one. All that stuff, I see it as a means to an end, not the end. And in the end, the core central part, it says it in Moroni 7, it says it in 1 Corinthians 13, so I don't think I'm doctrinally straying here to say we do all these things to bring each other together. We use a lot of names for God. We don't call God obedience with a capital O. We don't call God virtue with a capital V. We call God love. And whatever we've done people can... when I hear the idea of building the kingdom, which building the kingdom of God, what does that mean? Does it mean creating more wards and getting enough Melchizedek priesthood holders to turn a branch into a ward and make wards and stakes? And, that's one way of looking, or having more chapels. Or to me, building the kingdom of God is being Christ-like. God is love. And I feel like when people get together at church and have all these excuses to interact with each other, oh, I'm the such and such first counselor, or I'm the coordinator of such and such. They're all just excuses for people to get together, interact with each other, interact with each other and do something positive. And I just think we have this mold that people keep wanting to use it on me and tell me, you don't fit this mold. You're not doing it right. And to me, that feels like the law of Moses. Like, here's the law. It's spelled out in these, on all these scrolls. Here's the law, or on these stones tablets. And Christ came and said, I fulfilled the law. And the Spirit is what gives life. And I just totally 100% reject the notion that I or you or whoever can't be a good Latter-day Saint if we don't fit a certain mold. Now, there are things that I'm agreeing to. Some I'm taking on faith. Some I'm doing not because my heart necessarily or my mind thinks that's a requirement for me to be a good person, but because I'm being part of this organization and I'm going to be a team player. And so I'm going to cooperate. But, it's like my wife, she grew up she wasn't this typical Molly Mormon. She likes science and she's brilliant. She's the scholarship girl at an age senior in high school when people are telling girls to go find their eternal companion at BYU. She's thinking, I want to be a biology researcher. And she didn't fit the mold. And for years I treated her like she was supposed to. And when she didn't, it felt disappointing to me. Like, why don't you want to be the wife that if I bring somebody home, some people over for dinner, you're the wife who will be ready with some food, or, like a good Mormon wife, like Emma and Joseph. And that's a mold we've never fit. And I think this mold may be the biggest lie out there. And it's the biggest thing we can use to, it creates fear. When people leave the church, they're fearing that they're getting outside of that perceived mold that they probably never fit fully anyway. some of us did a pretty good job of looking like we did. But I just reject this mold concept.
Yeah.
I really do.
No, and I support the spirit of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think everyone's a buffet Mormon and a cafeteria Mormon. No one believes everything. No one does everything. Like, there's a level at which I'm totally with you 100%. Like,
Yeah.
And even if we're going to say the mold means it's paying 10% of your gross, or the mold is, no black tea, but green tea's okay. Like, we can get in all these details when we're talking about the mold.
Yeah.
And I can totally see where you're coming from. I do think that, though, that's a subtle way of missing what I'm really trying to say. Another way to say it would be, let's just say you get elected to Congress.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a member of the House of Representatives. And the whole point is to vote on legislation.
Make laws.
To propose legislation.
Yeah.
But you don't really believe that laws exist. And so maybe you sit in your office, but maybe you don't show up for the votes, or maybe you show up, but you don't really pay attention. You just push whatever button, and you don't really engage because you don't really buy into the fact that they're actually making laws that govern people's lives. And it's at that level because the leaders, the church wouldn't exist without the leaders. And it's the leaders that are setting this mold. They're the ones doing it. And they're the ones saying that these are the terms, and these are the official terms as spokesmen of God, as special witnesses of Jesus. And so there's a level at which everything you're saying is beautiful, and I love it, and I support it. There's a level at which I think you're kind of avoiding a reality, which is that we were all given the binary mindset. We were all taught this doctrine of theology. We're told that they're prophets of God. We're told that they're special witnesses of Christ. Everyone's operating under that assumption, and those are the terms of the relationship, just like a congressman proposes legislation, votes on legislation, and those laws actually impact people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
There's a degree to which you're basically saying, I want to be in Congress, but not of Congress. I want to be in the church, but not of the church. And to reduce what I'm saying to I'm trying to impose some arbitrary Sadduceical or Pharisaical mold that everyone has to fit a mold. I'm not saying that.
I'm not saying
I'm saying some would say, and again, this isn't a criticism because I love what you're doing. I think it's beautiful. Some would say you're not really engaging in Mormonism. You're just kind of doing your own thing in the church, but you're really not cooperating with and engaging with the whole purpose and intent of the organization, not only as it was established, but as it has been taught and supported for 150 years. And if I have a secret hope that you'll go, I get what you're saying, versus just there's lots of ways to be Mormon, because I think there's something to what I'm saying, even if I love and celebrate what you're doing. Yeah. I think if you're being honest, there's a degree to which you're really in Congress but not legislating. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not trying to gaslight you. I'm not saying that what you're saying is not true. That there is, if you go to BYU, you're going to be formed by a mold. If you're a missionary, you have a little white Bible, you're going to be molded in a certain way. I'm saying I feel like when I say I reject the mold, I'm not rejecting the fact that it exists. The mold that for so long you don't have a beard. The mold that you wear a white shirt. The mold because one leader gave a talk about it once.
And all that stuff I see is petty and arbitrary.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's minor stuff. But I feel empowered, I guess, to engage with the church in a way that feels right to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And
no one can argue with that.
Yeah, it's And I would say everybody has that right, even if what you're describing is so powerful. It's so strong in terms of the mindset of people feeling like I need to look a certain way, I need to act a certain way, I need to know certain things are true. But every ward, and I would say every ward, look at the roles of the ward. Look how many people are members versus how many people come. Where do all those people go that you never see? It's people who don't feel like they can fit in to that mold, or like they don't want to. And my thought is, what is the purpose of the church? I'm kind of repeating myself. Is it to build more churches, more wards? Why would you write off the idea that in the end, love is the central idea, even if you didn't feel that way, and even if that hasn't been the reality for many people? Because for a lot of people, when they give their time, talents, and everything they possess, if they're doing it over an extended period, they're doing it with love in their heart, and they're reaching out, and the church gives them ways to love over and over, and that's the driving force in their life. And so I see what you're saying, but in the church, it's not. People are so used to thinking of authority as external. An authority is your bishop or a prophet or, usually some male leader. And to me, the key relationship is directly with God. And we don't talk about that a lot because it sounds almost subversive, like, oh, if you have an idea, if you're Rock Waterman or whoever, and if you have a different idea than the people we're saying are in authority, does that become dangerous? Are you going to go off on your own tangent and think you're right? And so instead we err on the other side, where we kind of farm out our conscience to other people, and we get so used to thinking that's what we're supposed to do that we forget what it feels like to say, oh, this person said this person in authority, I don't agree with it, and that's okay. I can be a great Latter-day Saint being a little different. We know the history where there are certain apostles that had different views on things. You don't hear it at church, but before the blacks got the priesthood, there was, who was it, Hugh B. Brown and Mark E. Peterson. They had two very different views, and they were both strong Latter-day Saints. You can be a Democrat and a Republican. You can be lots of different ways. I guess I'm saying this in the spirit of, even if you think that hasn't been possible in the past, it's going to be possible in the future, because as people leave churches change, adapt, and people come back. It's like waves going in and out. And in the end, what matters about a church is if you feel loved there. If you go to a church and you're constantly feeling conflict, you're feeling like you can't pursue truth because the church has a dogma that conflicts with truth, you're going to leave. And then how is the church serving spiritual needs of people? You could have the attitude of, oh, if they leave, they're bad people and they didn't choose, and the celestial kingdom's going to be small. I don't think that. If we're all God's children, I think God's going to have a lot of ways for us to get back, whether you see that as metaphorical or whether you see that as literal. And we need to change the discussion. This idea that's so rigid, it locks the church into being this certain way because a few key leaders who were vocal over 40 years or 50 years had an approach that was widely embraced. But how was it 100 years ago? How's it going to be in 100 years? It's easy to just blow off the church or any church and say it's just a dogmatic, stifled place with a bunch of sheep. It's a lot harder to say, I'm going to see something good in this, and maybe I even help change it. How revolutionary is that? How is that seen as rebellion or positive? I want a church that my kids, if they wanted to, could say, I could see myself there. I can see myself being loved there. I want a church where I want a place where people feel like they could come and feel welcome and loved, even if they can't fit this mold that you're talking about. I think I'm repeating myself over and over, but I'm just trying to drive it home that don't buy the idea that if you can't be this certain way, that the church is not only a bad place for you, but it's hostile. And like cultures develop and traditions develop. And maybe we have some bad traditions. How are they changing? Are we waiting for somebody to stand up and announce we're allowed to change? I don't think so. I think it changes by lots of people saying, hey, I think a little differently on this issue. And things change over time.
You're saying we are the church.
Yeah. We.
not the leaders, the members.
The leaders are important parts of the church.
But it's like the body of Christ, the head and the feet and the hands. Everybody's kind of got their role.
Yeah.
But the body is bigger than the head, right? Body's more than the head.
A lot more.
Yeah. Let's see, a couple more questions. Is there anything, obviously God telling you to leave the church would cause you to leave the church. Is there anything the church could do that would make you feel like you needed to leave it again?
Like if they secretly have $100 billion in an account. I laugh at that knowing that a lot of people are frustrated with that. But when I was 25, if you would have told me I was going to leave the church, I would have had no clue how to process that. I can only say that I want to be part of this church, and I don't have any lines where if somebody stands up in general conference and says something, or if the church gives a press release and says something, that's not me waiting to say, oh, they did that thing and I'm out of here. I want to be there, and I want to be part of making it a good place. And so, I don't know, the younger me that was sure would easily be able to say with certainty, never, ever. And then 10 years later, I did. And so my heart wants to be there, and that's what I'm committed to right now.
If you're in Chicago and someone randomly walks up to you and says, hey, what religion are you? Are you comfortable saying...
I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
That's what you'd say?
Yeah.
And they'd say, what is that? Does that mean you're Mormon?
You might know it as Mormon or LDS.
Okay.
But yeah, I would proudly say it.
And would there be any part of you that would want to sort of say, but I'm not racist, or I'm not homophobic, or I'm okay with science, and I'm not... Like, would you want to give would you feel a pull to give additional disclaimers or allowances for more progressive or liberal ideology? Or could you just allow people to think, yeah, he's LDS, which means Mormon, and would you just be okay with that?
Well, in this hypothetical scenario where somebody walks up to me and asks, what religion are you? I assume there's a conversation that follows that. And I would certainly want to provide clarifying information if they had some assumptions about me that they associated with with this church, like a past with racism?
You know, when I used to answer that question, and back then it was okay to say Mormon, I would worry that if I told someone just I'm a Mormon,
It's still okay to say
would.
for you.
Yeah,
I
right.
want to honor what.
Sure.
But
No,
I'm not offended when you say that.
My only point is that I was embarrassed by the general perceptions about some of the things that people know and think about Mormons, that they don't like LGBT people, that they can be racist, that they are polygamists or whatever, that they're Republican or they're conservative, which, you know, some of those things can be true at times. And I'm just wondering if you ever have that sort of part of you that doesn't want to fully be identified or wants to give those asterisks or explanations because you're not fully comfortable with how Mormons are perceived in the broader world.
I would hope to be able to change the perception that, you know, if a black person or a gay person approached me with that question and then was ready to tell me that they felt like that was a problem and that I might even be their enemy because of it, I would definitely hope to change their perception. Maybe more than changing their perception, I would want to just listen to them and learn how they have come to feel that way. You know, is it? I know there's good reasons for it. I'm not saying there aren't, but I would hope I would come across as somebody who's not, you know, dogmatic or ready to just tell them what's what. I would hope to engage in a conversation with them where they could sense that I respect them, and I would hope that they could see that in me.
Let's just say that, I mean, over time we know that people are leaving the church. A lot of people are leaving the church, and I know that concerns you on some level, at least in instances where people might want to stay or be able to stay or benefit by staying. But let's just say the trend in the church is towards metaphorical belief and away from literal belief, towards more progressive ideologies and away from more conservative ones.
Well, the book, Millennials, what's the book?
Jenna Reese's book.
Jenna Reese's book. She's showing, you know, you could call it prophetic, because she's talking to millennials. She's seeing their views, and these are the people who are going to be.
And my question is, do you think the church becomes a weaker church the less the rigid sort of conservative ideology? There's this idea in sociology that the more demands a religion exerts on its people, the more committed they are. And the less demands you put on your membership, either in theology or in practice, the weaker their allegiance to the organization comes. So as more and more members maybe trying to adopt more of a progressive or open-minded, less literal mindset with regards to the church, do you see that weakening the church?
No, I see religion, mine and others, matching the times they're in. And so when we talk about a church in 1830 where everybody and their dog was starting a new church and having a vision and starting a little community off in the woods somewhere, that was a thing back in that time. It was part of their time. And I wasn't trying to say that in a way to demean the church, but if you study history, there were lots of little groups doing that type of thing. It was in the air. And then I think our church is very unique in the way it was isolated for a few decades in Utah. But for a lot of years, we've tried to. When my oldest brother, the one who passed away, when he was young, an extended family member tried to tell him something about. I think he was entering his teenage years, and he was trying to talk to him about sex, which would have been a lot better to let my dad do that instead of him. But But he said something about sex just being for children, having children. And today, if you asked the average faithful Mormon, they would say, what? Sex is about bonding in a relationship. It's about far more than just having children. But somebody 50 years ago, if that was part of the morality of the time, whether they were actually practicing that or not, I just think the church can evolve in a way. You can see the word demanding as a negative word, like it's just sucking so much out of you. But in my experience, when I have been most engaged in the church in the past, when the church was expecting things out of me, it tended to be me that demanded the most out of me, trying to do my best. And I loved it. And so I don't think demanding has to be, I think we could still be a church that asks people to sacrifice in a lot of ways. And that could be a path to them having a lot of joy while still being able to evolve over time, because culture evolves. And I think our evolution with the way our leadership structure is, where somebody might be called when they're in their 40s or 50s and last 30 or 40 years, I think our change cycles tend to go with that kind of time frame, as older leaders cycle out and newer ones cycle in, and they're going to have, without seeing the older leaders as wrong, I think younger leaders are just naturally going to have different sensibilities and bring about changes that a previous generation of leaders didn't. And so you could say, if I feel like the younger leader, take the issue of homosexuality. If I think that's an idea that the current generation of leaders has had for 50 years, and if I think leaders in 20 years will approach it in a different way, I don't think that's being unfaithful to think that. It's just watching history unfold. And so a lot of people will say the Mormon Church takes 20 years longer than everybody else to get it right. And that's the nature of a conservative institution, is you conserve things longer. But I don't think that prevents me or any other member of this church from having our own views on certain things.
Yeah. One of our listeners, Kristen, a dear friend of mine. Hey, Kristen. I think Aaron's tuning in at some point too. Kristen writes, as a woman, how do you say, quote, I'm not going to fit their mold, ? The patriarchy is not my choice. The inequality and sexism comes with the package. How does this environment feel loving to me? And I think you could probably say the same thing about an LGBT person who's told they can't love who they love, or a trans person, a transgender person who's told gender is eternal and whatever gender you were assigned at birth, that's the gender you are, whatever the case may be. Kristen's sort of voicing probably concerns from a lot of vulnerable or minority or disempowered populations in the church.
Yeah.
Again, she says, how does this environment feel loving to me? And if you express this concern for change, you're likely misunderstood, brushed off, and stigmatized, if not, in extreme cases, excommunicated. Mm-hmm. What would you say to someone like Kristen, who's a feminist, or someone who's a thinker, or someone who's LGBT, when they say, like, this church is actually kind of hostile to who I am at my core, it seems?
I would love to go to dinner with Kristen and her husband and bring my wife, because I think my wife would have a better perspective. I can try to have a perspective that I think is thoughtful but I think it'll ring hollow coming from me. I think
Because you'd be mansplaining.
yeah, I think my wife, in her case specifically, asking about from a woman's perspective, my wife's in the same boat, and there are some things about the church she enjoys, and there are some things about the church that are really hard to connect with. So I want to I want to pass on that one, or invite. Is this person local?
No, they live in Arkansas. She lives in Arkansas.
Or a phone call or something, a Skype call or something. I would love to have this conversation, but I would really like this was the question earlier that I said I liked on the list of questions on Facebook. It's a conversation I would love to have more, but I would really like to listen more than explain.
That's a good policy. That's good policy. Well, I really like what Stephen writes here. Stephen Farrell Jr. writes, I could never feel the same way, but I can tell Joe is a good, kind-hearted guy that wants to be wanted and feel part of a community. And I would add that is following his conscience and his perception of what God wants him to do. And he goes on to write, if the church can give him that, even though the truth claims, in Stephen's opinion, are false, then more power to him. Maybe he can make an impact on people in his own ward, and really that's what matters. So that's what Stephen's saying. What do you think about what Stephen's saying?
I'm just thinking about my attempts to make, if you take God out of it, this experience that I have shared, if you're just looking at it very practically in terms of at some point being part of a group is going to does the good outweigh the harm? Utilitarian. And I would say, maybe today you have this perception, not unfounded, based on reality. I'm not calling it fake. Maybe today you have a perception that the church could never work for you because you feel like if you go there, you have to keep your mouth shut, or people are going to feel uncomfortable around you because of things you say or whatever. That's, instead of saying that's just how it is, end of story, I would like to say, can people help make us better? Like, if 20 people that used to go to church in a ward come back to the church, and instead of just saying, this is a hostile environment, here's how it is, you probably have a lot of friends in your neighborhood if you've lived there and if you were active in the ward there for a while. Like, is there a way that we could think about this again, like rethink it instead of calling it done? And is there a way could a ward learn to be more sensitive? The people I interact with in my ward are really nice and good people, and I don't think they say things with the intent to harm. And I think if they had a way to be told in a way that isn't attacking them, because none of us respond well to just feeling critiqued or attacked. But what if people said, hey, you know what? I miss the community, and if maybe these 2 or 3 things could improve, maybe I could fit in there, even if I'm not a traditional believer, or even if I'm not a believer at all. Maybe I just like hanging out with my neighbors. And could we have that conversation? Are there people who... Can you imagine a forum where, like, I've been thinking, how cool would it be if we sent out a survey to everybody in our ward, all the members on the list, where people, instead of just feeling like it was kind of I'm in or I'm out, end of discussion, where we ask them, how do you feel? What could make a difference? It's like mending a friendship that was broken. I remember when I was a little kid, well, about 11 years old, and I had this close friend, and we got mad at each other once, and we didn't want to hang out for about a year. And then one night we were running around the halls in a dark church playing tag or something. And we both ended up in this little nook by a bishop's office. And we hadn't talked to each other for a year. And I think he turned to me and said, "I've missed you." And I'm like, "I've missed you too. Let's be friends again." And we became best friends again. And is that, back to that germ analogy, is there a way we can wash our hands a little bit? Is there a way we could do things differently where somebody who isn't a traditional believer can say, maybe I can give a little, and maybe people at the church can learn how to talk a little bit more sensitively. And maybe there's some common ground we have that we've spent a few years thinking was impossible. And maybe I could be really happy re-engaging in those relationships. I'm very much an idealist, but I don't hear us talking about these discussions. All I hear are discussions about people who stay and are faithful and people who leave and are apostates, or, the great who fell. And why don't we have conversations about, can we be friends again? And if it's not at church, are there other ways we can be friends within our neighborhood, to where that guy who stops going to church and his family's still going isn't just somebody who kind of disappears for a few years, but is still involved in ways with the community and with friendships in ways that make sense.
I love it. So to close, if it's all right, do you have a plea for, let's just say somebody right now is about to go through a faith crisis, or they're in the middle of a faith crisis, or let's say they've left the church and they're totally gone. Mm-hmm. I know that you're on the record saying you don't believe you have to be Mormon to be healthy or happy. You don't have to be Mormon to be like blessed by God. Mormons aren't better than anybody. There's good in this church, but there's good outside the church, that not everybody, in your view, is called to be an active Mormon in this life, and that you don't think that that's
the overwhelming majority,
and that you don't think that's a requirement or something that's superior. I just want to make sure we close with that you're not taking any position of superiority or exclusivity.
Correct.
So given all that, do you have an appeal or a plea for either a doubting Mormon who's active still, or a questioning Mormon, or an inactive Mormon, or an ex-Mormon? Do you have a call to them or a plea to consider or to come back, or, to entertain the idea, or do you have any type of thing you want to say in closing as some sort of appeal to anyone?
I just think it's so sad that people can feel so isolated and so much frustration and anger. It won't necessarily be the members of the church who start it. Sometimes we leave the church and we say they're the ones professing to be so good and so full of truth. If we're going to fix this relationship, let the holy people do it. And I think that attitude maybe doesn't work. I just feel this sense that instead of assuming that leaving the church or changing the way you believe about the church has to mean that relationships end, first, I want to say to any members who are listening, maybe you've distanced yourself from a friend or a family member who left because it's awkward. Reach out. Maybe you're fearing that they're going to think that the only reason you're reaching out is because you're trying to convert them. Tell them explicitly that you care about them, whether they ever come back to the church or not. Just clear the water, clear the air, and let them know. Because in the back of their minds, they're probably thinking, you're only doing this to try to get me back. Show them that that's not the case. Be a friend. And to people who are out of the church and feeling separated, whether it's from family members or from neighbors in your ward area, pick one person who you considered a really good friend and start a conversation. Don't make it the conversation of all the reasons that you believe the church isn't true. Make it safe for them to start. Maybe that'll come over time. But let's stop assuming these relationships have to end, and let's do the work to rebuild them, because as far as I'm concerned, as a follower of this church and a follower of Christ, how I treat people matters more than whether I convert anybody. And I just hope we can find ways to find common ground in our neighborhoods and in our families. And it starts with kind conversations, where you suppress the need to rescue somebody or show somebody how stupid their religion is. Instead, focus on the relationship and trying to build it. And I guess that's all I can say. I want to do that on my own. And if you're listening to this, think of one person you can do that with. And I think life will be better.
Anything else you want to say before we end?
I think that's it.
All right. Be kind, everybody. Be good to each other. And let's find ways to build bridges, not divisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on Mormon Stories and giving us so many hours of your time. And so many people have written that they just love your heart. They love your attitude. They love your gentleness, your kindness. You can go back and read, but there's a lot of people saying nice things. There's other people who don't like it and are uncomfortable with it, but I know you're
That's
seasoned
fine.
enough to not be bothered by that.
Yeah.
And but I'm grateful for everyone who's tuned in. I know that this is going to reach people, and there's actually several people that posted saying they've also left the church and then got rebaptized. So I mean, this is going to be a thing, as long as the church is thriving and you know, existing and doing what it does. There's going to be people that leave and then decide they want to come back. So if they're going to do that, I hope they do it in your style. So I'm just really grateful. Thanks for coming on, and stay in touch.
All right.
Will ya?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right. Joe Tippetts, everybody. Thanks so much, Joe. And just to close, thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thanks for everyone's support. Please, if you are a supporter of Mormon Stories podcast or the Open Stories Foundation, financially, thank you. If you are not, but you value this programming and want to see it continue, we invite you to consider becoming a monthly donor. You can go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, choose the amount that works for you. We really appreciate the support. We live and exist by your contributions. So please contribute. You can also give us a positive review on iTunes. You can give us a positive review on Facebook. You can share this content with other people. There's lots of ways you can support us. We do have a Thrive event coming to Phoenix, February 1st. Go to thrivebeyondmormonism.com to check that out. We also have Thrive event coming to Chicago in April. Again, go to thrivebeyondmormonism.com to find out information about that event. We have some other retreats and activities we want to be promoting in the weeks and months ahead, including for the next 2 months. Natasha Elfer Parker is presenting weekly here at the Thrive Center in Holiday, Utah, on different aspects of navigating a faith crisis. So if you live near Salt Lake City or Holiday, come on Wednesdays at 7 p.m., and there'll probably be a fun activity of progressive and post-Mormons or just post-Mormons where we're trying to create a community and heal and grow together and support each other. And members come too. So we've had several people who actively attend church. You're also welcome. And maybe we'll show up in your ward one of these days as well. I think Joe would like that.
Yeah.
So thanks for all the support. Please stay tuned. And we look forward to seeing you guys again soon on Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.